All right, kiddos, last set of questions. Question 16. What value of n makes the equation below true? Finally, a question that is a can you do it question. This is one that we have been practicing consistently. Hopefully, this is one that you feel strong about completing. To solve this equation of 2n minus 17 equals 35, you have two choices. Choice number one, you can take these answers and you can substitute them in for the variable until you get a true sentence. So you could take two groups of 9, 2 times 9 minus 17, and see if that does in fact give you 35. All right, 2 times 9 is 18, and 18 minus 17 does not equal 35. Therefore, it is not the correct solution to this equation. So you can continue that process until you bump into the right answer. But because this is a can you do it kind of question, I'd prefer that we just solve it the way you've been taught. So we are going to get rid of that constant first. We're going to do the opposite of subtracting 17, which is adding 17. So I'm going to add 17 to both sides. I'll get 2n equals whatever 35 plus 17 is, which is 52. The last step is to get rid of the 2 because 2 is squished next to the n. It's being multiplied. I'm going to do the opposite operation, which is division. So I'm going to divide both sides by 2. 52 divided by 2. 2 goes into 5 2 times. Bring down the 2. 2 goes into 12 6 times. 6 times 2 is 12. So my answer is 26. I can also check that answer by substituting. So I can take my original equation of 2n minus 17 equals 35, and I can substitute that 26 in for n. Remember, that's a multiplication, 2 times n. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and do the math. 2 times 26, we just did that in the opposite over here. 2 times 26 is 52, and 52 minus 17 is 35. 52 minus 17. 12 minus 7 is 5, 4 minus 1 is 3. So it checks. If only all the test questions were like this, we'd all do wonderfully. Okay, that's number 16. Moving on to number 17. A tree service charges $25 to come to your house and give you an estimate, and an additional $50 for each hour of work. For one house call yesterday, the tree service earned $275. Which equation can be solved to find the number of houses he worked at? Which equation can be solved to find the number of hours he worked at the house? All right, so this is very similar to a couple of the other problems that we've worked on. We've got an initial fee, $25 just to come out to the house. That's the initial fee. And he has to also charge $50 for each hour, per hour. Remember, each or per means multiply. So we have to pay a flat fee, and we have to pay dollars per times hour, however many hours he works. And that's going to give us our total amount of money that we have to pay. Okay, so let's go back now to the problem and pull out the information that matches this setup that we have. So our fee is $25 just to come to the house. So the fee is 25, and plus we also have to pay $50 per hour. Now, we don't know how many hours, find the number of hours. That's our unknown. So we're going to call that with a variable. The answer choices are using the letter X. All right, so we are going to pay a $50 times however many hours he works times X. And that's going to give us our total amount that we owe, which in this problem is $275. All right, so this is the equation that matches this scenario. I'm now going to look and see which one looks as close to this as possible. And if you take a second to look through your answer choices, C is correct. All they did from answer C to what I show here is they reversed these two in position. Okay, so they put the total at the front. They said the total is $275, and you're paying $50 per hour times X plus the fee of $25. So these two equations are equivalent. Question number 18. In this particular problem, it gives us a scenario of a shape. A rectangular tabletop is 12 inches less than the length. The perimeter of, it should say of, not if, the perimeter of the tabletop is 180 inches. Write and solve an equation to find the width of the tabletop. All right, so ladies and gents, when they give you a problem like this, the best strategy is to draw yourself a picture, especially if you are a visual person. It will help you understand what is happening. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to draw myself a rectangle. And then I'm going to try and fill in some information that corresponds with what the problem says. The problem says that the width of a rectangular tabletop, so the width is always shorter than the length, so this is my width, that the width is 12 inches less than the length. It doesn't tell us any information at all about the length. So we are going to start building from there. We are going to say that the length is our unknown. That's what we do not know. So I'm going to call that X. Normally I'd call it L, but I don't have cursive available to me, and so it would just look like the number 1. And so I'm going to call the length X. And so I'm going to then be able to describe the width in terms of the length. So the width, we are told, is 12 inches less. It's 12 inches less than that. So I'm going to take that X, which is the length, and I'm going to subtract 12 from it, and that would be my width. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I am going to add in all this information to my picture. Okay, so I know that my length is X. And if this is my length from here to here, it is also my length at the bottom. Right, they're going to be the same. That's what makes it a rectangle. The two lengths are the same. And my two widths are going to be the same. And so the width is X minus 12. And that will be the same on both sides. The last piece of this is to remember how to find a perimeter. Okay, so the perimeter, the formula for a perimeter is to add all the sides together. Right, so we are going to use that and this information that we have written on our drawing to try and create our equation. All right, so here's the equation that I would come up with. In order for me to find the perimeter, I am going to add all of my sides together. Okay, so I'm going to start by adding X minus 12. Doesn't matter the order that you put these in. So I'm going to start here and I'm going to work my way around. I'm going to add these all together. So X minus 12 plus X plus another X minus 12 plus another X. And that's going to give me my perimeter. And that tells me that the perimeter of the tabletop is 180 inches. Okay, so there's my original equation. That's my initial equation. I add all the sides of the lengths of the rectangle together, and it will give me my perimeter. So now that I have that part completed, I have to now try and figure out how to solve this equation. So in order for me to do that, I am going to start by combining my like terms together. Okay. So I'm going to identify the terms that are alike by color coding. Anytime I see an X, I'm going to circle it and I'm going to take the sign that's in front of it. All right, so I see X plus X plus X plus X in red. X plus X plus X plus X. My pen does not want to write. I know you've never heard me say that before. And then I am going to combine the minus 12, which is a constant, and the other minus 12, which is a constant. Okay, so then I'm going to do minus 12, minus 12. I'm putting my like things together. And that is going to equal 180. Remember, the perimeter is 180. That was given. Okay, so if I add my x's together, I have 4 of them. I have 4 x's. And if I combine my -12 minus 12, I could either put that into Desmos, or I could rewrite it as addition, -12 plus -12, and that gives me -24. All right, so I have I have 4x minus 24, and that equals 180. Now I've got an equation that's much easier to solve. I'm going to follow my normal steps. I'm going to get rid of the constant first by using opposite operations. I will add 24 to both sides. Okay, this is a 0 pair, it eliminates. I'm left with 4x equals, and then I'm going to add, and I get 204. 180 plus 24 is 204. Last step is to get the variable alone, do the opposite operation of multiplication, which is division. So I'm going to divide both sides by 4, and I get x equals whatever I get. 204 divided by 4. 4 goes into 20 5 times. 5 times 4 is 20. 4 goes into 4 1 time with nothing left over. So my answer is 51. But what does that represent? All right, so what it represents is whatever x is. And if I had left that picture up, we would have remembered, and I'll redraw it for you. I just ran out of space. Okay, so remember our rectangle. Here was our rectangle. I had called the length x, and I had called the width x minus 12 because it was 12 less than that. So when I solved for x, what I figured out was the length. I found out that x, the length, is 51. And then I could find out what the width is by subtracting 12 from 51. So instead of doing x minus 12, I do 51 minus 12. And 51 minus 12 is 39. So I know that my width is 39. The final check step, kids, is to add these all together. So if this length is 51, so is this length. And if the width is 39, so is this width. And so I could do 51 plus 51 plus 39 plus 39 and make sure that I get my perimeter of 180. That would be my check step. So 9 plus 9 plus 1 plus 1 is 20. 5 plus 5 is 10. Plus 3 is 13, plus 3 is 16, plus 2 is 18. And it checks. My perimeter is 180. Now remember, on this particular question, you're not giving any answer choices at all. It is a free response. So they are expecting not only that you write this equation, all right? They expect that this equation appears in some form, and then it expects you to solve that equation to find the width. So we have to be very careful when we're answering these questions. I don't even need to tell them that x equals 51. That's the length. What they asked me to find is the width. So my answer would have to have that equation in it, and it would have to say that the width is 39. So be specific when you're answering these questions to get full credit. Moving on. Question 19. Carmen scored 30 points in her basketball game. That was 5 more than twice the number of points Paris scored. Which equation can be used to find P, the number of points Paris scored? All right, so they've already defined the variable. They've already told us that P represents the number of points Paris scored. I can go back up into the problem and I can read that Carmen scored 30 points. That's her total. And it also tells me that the 30 points that she scored is 5 more than twice the number of points Paris scored. And Paris scored P. So we need to figure out what 5 more than twice P looks like. 5 more than twice P. Okay, twice means to multiply by 2. So I'm going to take 2 and I'm going to multiply it by P. And I'm going to write it like this, 2P. I'm going to just squish them next to each other. Now I need 5 more than that. So I'm going to add 5 to it. And that 5 more than twice the number of points Paris scored was her total. And her total number of points scored was 30. So I am looking for the equation 2P plus 5 equals 30. That's A. Again, remember that the order doesn't matter. I can switch these. I can, move the equal sign to the back side of the problem. I can switch my 5 and my 2P. The commutative property tells me that that's okay, that it doesn't matter the order that I add things in. Okay, so letter A and the equation I wrote are identical. You do not need to solve the equation. It just asks you to pick the equation. All right, kiddos, we are on our last question on this practice test. And of course, it's going to be a good one. This one's similar to the other rectangular problem we did. Let's see if you can make some connections. It says a company makes rectangular sandboxes. The width, W, of the alpha model is half of its length, L. This model comes in various sizes, but its length and width are always related in this ratio. No matter how big or how small they make that sandbox, the length is always going to be bigger than the width. The width is always going to be half the length. They are asking you which equation could represent the perimeter of the alpha model sandbox. In order for us to answer this question, what we need to do is we really need to draw ourselves that picture and figure out how we would go about calculating the perimeter. So just like the last problem, I'm going to draw a rectangle and I'm going to label it with the appropriate measurements. Okay, so it says that the width is half of its length, L. So I know that the length is L. I'm going to use a cursive L so that it doesn't look like the number 1. And I know that the width is half of that. Half of the length L. Half looks like 1/2. Of means to multiply. So the expression that represents the width is 1/2 L. Okay, so I'm going to write that in over here. In order for me to find a perimeter, I am going to add all of the lengths and the widths together. So I am going to start here. You can start anywhere. So I'm going to do 1/2 L plus L plus 1/2 L plus L, and that's going to give me my perimeter, P. All right, I'm going to now go ahead and simplify this equation. I'm going to remember that the invisible numbers in front of a letter are 1, and now I'm going to add them all together. Okay, so I have 1/2 plus 1 plus 1/2 plus 1. I'm going to put the 2 halves together to make 1 whole 1. So that this and this together make 1, plus 1 is 2, plus 1 is 3. So I get 3L. If I take 3 and multiply it by my length, I get my perimeter. So this is the equation that we came up with in order to solve this problem. Now I need to go and look through my answer choices and figure out which ones apply. Okay, so I need to figure out which ones give me a true sentence. So let's start with letter A. It says a sandbox with a perimeter of 12. And I get this expression of 3/2 L equals 12. Right, so in order for this to be true, I am going to have to take this number 12 and I am going to have to substitute it into my original equation for the perimeter. And then I'm going to solve their given equation and see if I get the same answers. Okay, so I'm going to kind of clean everything up a little bit. Now that we've got our formula of 3L equals P, that's our target. I'm going to erase everything else. Okay, and I am going to now use letter A and see if it is a correct answer. So if letter A is true, the perimeter would be 12. So instead of 3L equals P, I'm going to write 3L equals 12. I'm going to divide both sides by 3. And I will find out that the length is 4. Okay, if the length is 4 in a rectangle, and its width is half of it, the width would be 2, half of 4 is 2. I would get 2 plus 4 plus 2 plus 4. And that would give me 6 plus 6, which is 12, which is the perimeter. Okay, so in our equation, 3L equals P, where 3L equals 12, which is our perimeter, we are able to tell that the length is 4, the width is 2, they are half of each other, and that we do get a perimeter of 12. Now we're going to take the equation that they gave us, 3/2 L equals 12, and we're going to solve it and see if we get the same thing. So we're going to do 3/2 times the length is equal to 12, and we're going to solve it. Okay, so remember, 3/2 is squished next to the letter L, which means it's a multiplication. I am going to do the opposite operation, which is division. So I'm going to divide both sides by 3/2. 3/2 L divided by 3/2 gives me 1L, or L. And so I'm left doing 12 divided by 3/2. And yes, you can use Desmos. So I'm going to do 12 over 1. And instead of multiplying by the fraction, instead of dividing by the fraction, I'm going to multiply by the reciprocal. I'm going to flip it. Okay, so 12 times 2, multiply straight across. 12 times 2 is 24. 1 times 3 is 3. 3 goes into 24 8 times. So what I was able to figure out is that the length is 8. Okay, now if I draw a picture, let's see if this makes sense. If my length is 8, my width is half of it, my width would be 4. And I would have to do 8 plus 8 plus 4 plus 4. And I'm going to tell you right now, that doesn't give you 12. 8 plus 8 is 16, 4 plus 4 is 8, and 16 plus 8 does not equal 12. Where did I get 12? That was the original equation. Okay, so the perimeter did not match with that equation, therefore A cannot be the right answer. Geez, that's a lot of work. Okay, let's try letter B. Okay, so A didn't work. Let's look at B. Maybe this will get easier with every one I do. So now, again, I'm just going to leave our target equation. Our target equation is 3L equals P. Letter B says a sandbox with a perimeter of 9, where 3L equals 9. So if I write 3L equals 9 and I solve this equation, I could divide both sides by 3. And I would get L equals 3. Now, that means that my length is going to be 3, and my width is going to be half of that. What's half of 3? Well, if I have 3 and I cut it in half, I'd cut it right down the middle, right? That means I'd have 1.5 on each side. Okay, so my widths are 1.5 and 1.5. Okay, so now if I add those all together, I get 3 plus 1 and 1/2. I started in a different place this time. I started here and I'm going to go this way. Plus 3 more plus 1.5. Okay, so I'm going to put these 1.5s together. We just undid the 3, right? We took 3 and I cut it in half and I said it was 1.5. So 1.5 plus 1.5 has got to be 3. All right, so these two put together, 1.5 plus 1.5 is 3. So 3 plus 3 plus 3 more from that 1.5 combined. And that gives me 9. All right, so that checks because it told me that the perimeter was 9. And I solved their formula and I got the right answer. So B is correct. At least we found one that works. It does say select all that apply. Maybe only one is correct, but we do have to work through the rest of these to see if any of them, any of the other problems fulfill the requirements. Okay, so let's keep going. Letter C. It says a sandbox with a perimeter of 24, and they give us 3W equals 24. Okay, to solve this equation, I'm going to divide both sides by 3. I get W equals 8. Now, guys, be careful here. They're no longer giving me the L, they're giving me the W. The W stands for the width. All right, so they're telling me that the width is 8. And remember, the width is half as long as the length. So if the width is half as long as the length and half as long as 8, this is half of it, right? This part from here to here is only half as long. That means this other part also has to be 8. So that means that the length is 16. Okay, hopefully some of you are already shaking your head, no, this can't be right. Because if I find the perimeter now and I add these all together, I'm supposed to get 24. And I know that 16 plus 16 plus 8 plus 8 is way too big. It is going to be much too big to be 24. So I know this cannot be one of the correct equations. So C is wrong. Pay attention to those letters. Okay, they do mean different things. L means length, W means width. Let's go on to letter D. Letter D says you have a sandbox with a perimeter of 20 feet. And it gives you the equation 2 times 3W equals 20. All right, so to solve this, I'm going to multiply 2 times 3W. 2 times 3 is 6. So 2 times 3W is 6W. And then to solve the equation, I'm going to divide both sides by 6. Yuck. I can see I'm going to end up with a fraction. My answer is going to be whatever 6 goes into 20. Doesn't go in a whole number of times. It goes in 3 times with 2 left over. So that's 2/6, right? This is my numerator. This is my denominator. And if I simplify 2/6, I can divide these both by 2. I get 3 1/3. And that's my width. So in order for me to see if this is correct, I am going to draw my rectangle. And I'm going to say that the width is 3 1/3. And this is half as long as the length, right? So if this is my length from here to here, this is my length from here to here, and half as big of it is my width, and it's 3 1/3. That means my length would be 3 1/3 plus 3 1/3. So I could add those two together, or I could multiply it by 2. 3 1/3 plus 3 1/3 gives me 6 2/3, which is my length. So this would be 6 2/3. I have to make a little extra space here. And this down here would be 6 2/3. Anybody rolling their eyes yet? What a crazy problem, right? And then to figure out my perimeter, I'd add them all together. So I'd add them all together, right? I do 3 1/3 plus 6 2/3 plus 3 1/3 plus 6 2/3. Okay, I am going to go ahead and just stack them all because they all have common denominators. And I'm just going to add and see what happens. I could also kind of use estimation here. Remember, my target is to see, does it give me 20? So let's take a look at this. All right, I'm going to erase this over here on the side. Let's just add the whole numbers and see if we're close. 3 plus 6 is 9, 3 plus 6 is 9, and 9 plus 9 is 18. Our target's 20. We're pretty close because we've got those fraction pieces, so it's worth continuing. All right, so I'm going to add my numerators. 1 plus 2 is 3, 3 plus 1 is 4, 4 plus 2 is 6. My denominator stays the same, 6/3. And we've already added our whole numbers together and we got 18. Okay, so what we need to do is we need to take this 6/3 and rename it. Remember, 6/3, you could divide 3 into 6, and that would give you 2. So 6/3 is the same as 2 whole ones. All right, so instead of the 6/3, we're adding on 2. 18 plus 2 is, guess what? 20. That is our perimeter, and that was what our target was. So letter D is a correct equation. Last one. Last one. All right, so the last equation that I'm testing is 2 groups of 3L equals 18. 2 groups of 3L equals 18. So I'm going to distribute or multiply. 2 times 3 is 6. 2 times 3L is 6L. At least this one's not giving us a fraction yet. I'm going to divide both sides by 6. And I get L equals 3. So in my rectangle, my length would be 3. My width would be half of it. Half of 3 is 1.5. All right, and then remember to find the perimeter. I'm going to add them all together. So I would do 1 1/2. I'm going to put the 1 1/2s next to each other, plus 1 1/2, plus 3 plus 3. And ladies and gents, I'm not even going to do this math because I know that if I just add my whole numbers, 1 plus 1 is 2. 1/2 plus 1/2 is 1 whole one. 3 plus 3 is 6. 2 plus 1 is 3. 3 plus 6 is not 18. It's only 9. So our target here of getting 18 didn't work. Therefore, E is incorrect. So the 2 correct answers are A and C. We are done with the practice test. I hope that you take the opportunity when you come to the live Zoom classes tomorrow to ask me questions on the ones that you still don't understand. I will explain that to you in a different way. Thanks so much for watching, kids.